We return now to our top stories. The smuggling balloons crossing Lithuania's border with Belarus and an apparent warming of ties between China and America. Here to break it all down is Daniel Hamilton, President of the Transatlantic Leadership Network. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you.
I want to start in Lithuania, which says it will shoot down balloons smuggling contraband from Russia's ally Belarus. Is this a response to another day, another week of hybrid war on the West waged by Moscow and its friends?
Well, it's just another example of Moscow doing this across the full line of contact with NATO allies. We focus on the Baltic states, on Poland, of course, but Russian activities in the Baltic, in the Black Sea, are also quite extensive. Similar types of disruptive activities. So it clearly is a hybrid effort. It's an attempt to distract, to poke NATO allies, see how they will respond, probe for weaknesses, and I'm sure this will probably go on for some time.
Vilnius insists that while these balloons are being sent by smugglers, Alexander Lukashenko is to blame for not stopping them. I'm interested in your view because does Lithuania have a point, or is there a world where these could be independent actors? I mean, I guess the question here is, do we run the risk of putting everything at the feet of Russian interference, giving Moscow perhaps too much credit?
Well, I don't think Belarus has an incentive on its own to be such a disruptive influence on its neighbors. It's seeking contacts. It's trying to avoid isolation. So I think it is doing this together with Russia. And I don't see Belarus acting as an independent agent really at all.
It's often said Vladimir Putin only truly understands force. Is Europe and NATO, in your view, moving closer to a world where it needs to consider Article 5, this clause that says an attack on one is an attack on all, that it might need to be invoked, or otherwise the alliance looks toothless?
Well, Article 5, depends on a consensus of NATO allies. It'll be a political decision in the end what that means. Right now, the option allies have is Article 4, which the Lithuanians have as an option to call the allies to the table for consultations on a security threat to their country, as do all NATO allies. So I think we need to understand that these probes will continue, but NATO has continued to pursue a defense policy now that basically is an at-the-border policy. It's conveyed that to the Russians. Anything that crosses the border can be shot down. Your foreign minister has said that, and so have other Baltic states. So I don't think it would be a surprise if a Russian activity or a drone or something comes across and is shot down by sovereign countries who are protecting their own airspace. I think that might be the next thing we need to be prepared for.
You mentioned Article 4. Does Article 4 really mean anything, not just within the NATO framework, but to Vladimir Putin? I mean, is that in any way shaping Vladimir Putin's idea of what he might do? Is that in itself, that clause, a little bit toothless?
Well, as I say, the balloons and the drones, these types of incursions, the sabotage that you have seen across Europe, these are all probes. These are all tests of NATO resolve. These are all indicators to Russian leadership. What can we exploit? Will the allies stick together or not? So any incident on its own, perhaps not so important, but taken together, they paint a design that Moscow has to test allied resolve. So Article 4 is just one step in the ladder of allied consultations. And so, if NATO responds to these things with an Article 4 contingency, that's a signal to the Russians about how united the alliance is. If it falls apart, there's no consultations, people say Lithuanians are overreacting, that's another signal that we would give to Russians. So it does have its own place in a political, chess game that's going on here right now.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk this week was quoted as saying, "We are talking about the end of the era of illusions in Europe. Too late, I'm afraid, too late to be well prepared for all the threats, but not too late to survive." So my question to you is, Did Europe fail to prepare its people? And is it now facing a fight for survival?
Yes, and yes. I think in the United States, both Democratic and Republican administrations have said, so for some time, for some years now, that the post-Cold War period is simply over. In the U.S., you can debate how well it's doing, but we have been debating in our country how to reposition the United States for a very different disruptive world, not just of big powers like China and Russia, but actors, terrorists, other kinds of actors, supply chain vulnerabilities. You see what's going on with the critical materials and rare earths saga. And the U.S. is having a big debate about that. In Europe, there wasn't much of a debate about it. I think countries like Poland were calling the alarm, but they were ignored by many other, particularly in Western European countries. And I think it's really only now seeping in that we have left that comfortable 30-year period since the end of the Cold War, and we are in an age of disruption, and Europe is just as affected by that as any other part of the world, and it's been very, very slow to understand this.
As we talk about particularly Russia's threats, Donald Trump says he won't waste his time with Vladimir Putin until a Ukraine peace deal is within reach. He also says Putin should focus on ending the war rather than testing missiles. Has President Trump been played for a bit of a fool by the Kremlin since he came into office?
Well, the president says many things, so yeah, he likes to entertain the media with all of his comments. It's hard to know what he really believes. I do think he thought he could somehow bring an end to this by having reason with Vladimir Putin. I think it's still unclear whether the president still believes he might still be able to do that. He has shown some tougher streaks now by sanctioning the Russian oil companies. The U.S. Senate has a very powerful sanctions bill
that came after a long delay, right?
What's that?
Even that came after a long delay, these oil sanctions that finally were implemented last week.
That's right. That's what I say. He might believe that. So I don't know that he still thinks he can make this work. I believe in his heart he still thinks this. And so he's playing both Russians and Ukrainians off, and whoever he sees last in the room either flatters or punishes, but he doesn't show a clear strategy, so how he would actually get to the next stage of ending this war. And I don't believe that Mr. Putin believes he has a strategy either.
We've also seen this week China and America trying to warm relations again. When it comes to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, is Xi Jinping actually the guy Donald Trump should be talking to, especially as Vladimir Putin has seemingly shown himself to be unwilling to negotiate thus far? I mean, is getting Xi and getting Beijing on board the real key to a lasting ceasefire?
It could be an important key, but I think this notion that you can break the Chinese and the Russians off against each other somehow in some diplomatic, magic is very hard to see. But there are, by playing both sides and their own incentives and their own concerns, the U.S. has some leverage. So, about 80% of Russia's ability to circumvent the sanctions is because China is supplying them with everything they need to do that. So if the president can say to the Chinese, that's not the best strategy here, we're going to have to, punish you on the energy issues and so on, that might have some effect. But Xi has his own interests in a relationship with Putin that go beyond sort of the U.S. dynamic. And I think the Chinese are embarrassed, though, by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I think they don't quite know what to do with it. They have to support it, but they really, would prefer that it's also done. So there's some leeway there, I think, for deft diplomacy, but it's not going to be a magic turnaround. And one visit with Xi Jinping isn't going to change everything.
Now, briefly, because we're running out of time, but I want to end somewhat where we started, the hybrid threats Europe is facing, because back in 2023, you co-authored a report that noted, and I quote, Moscow and Beijing are sharing a toolkit of strategies to undermine NATO members. Is that what we're seeing play out in real time?
Yes, and increasingly, they share not only strategies, they share resources, they share intelligence, they share both economic and natural, critical materials, and they are engaged together in a broader campaign globally to sort of undercut the Western, rules-based order. They have a different view. I think they have different views. They are not the same view. I think China is trying to orchestrate a new kind of global order. Russia is simply disrupting the order that exists. So again, there's some leeway there. There's some open space there that good diplomacy could try to exploit. But there's no doubt they have found alliance with each other to be very convenient right now, as the U.S. particularly goes through a lot of turmoil, and the Europeans don't seem to know what to do.
Daniel Hamilton, President of the Transatlantic Leadership Network, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And that's all for World News Tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.